Hey everybody, Mary Fran Bontempo here. And before we get started with today's show, I just wanted to let you know that my new book, From Broken to Brilliant, How to Live a Brilliantly Resilient Life, is available on Amazon. Super excited about this book, which provides a roadmap of how to live a brilliantly resilient life. You'll get advice not only from me, but from so many dozens of our podcast guests who were kind enough to share their tips on how to reset, rise, and reveal your own brilliance. So head on over to Amazon, get a copy of the book From Broken to Brilliant, and now let's get on with the show. Welcome to the Brilliantly Resilient podcast. What's your train wreck? Everyone has one. The question is, are you just visiting or are you going to live there? I'm Mary Fran Bontempo. Join me and let's learn how to come through those train wrecks, not broken, but brilliant. Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Brilliantly Resilient. I have one of my favorite guests and friends here with me today, my friend Christine Eberle. I'm going to give you a little bit of her background story and then we'll get into why we're here today. Christine is a graduate of St. Joseph's University and Boston College, where her studies included English, theology, and pastoral ministry. She served as campus minister in higher education for 26 years, and then in 2019, she took the leap to stepping down to pursue freelance writing, speaking, and retreat facilitation. She's the author of 3 books, Finding God in Ordinary Time, which lives on my nightstand because it is a beautiful little book. Finding God Abiding, another wonderful book, and her new book, which is what we're here to talk about today, Finding God Along the Way, which is coming in January from Paraclete Press. Christine, thank you for joining me.
Mary Fran, always a pleasure.
So, the basis of this book is you walking the Camino, which I must tell you is one of my husband's obsessions. I'm not sure if he'll ever get to do it, but I, on the other hand, wonder what could possibly possess someone to think it's a good idea to walk for God knows how many miles for a month in hilly terrain with people you don't know, sleeping in bed. Like to me, it just sounds, ugh. But there is a greater purpose. So tell me about how this desire started
Mhm.
and the whole point of the book, you say, is to learn to look at life and live with a pilgrim's heart. Get into what that means for me.
Sure. So first, a clarification. When you say that doing the Camino has been on Dave's bucket list, when people refer to the Camino,
Right.
they generally mean the Camino de Santiago, which is a very ancient route that goes from many locations, including France and Portugal, sort of to a point, Santiago de Compostela in northwestern Spain. I did, and that has been on my bucket
And
list for,
that's the Camino of St. James, right?
right,
Right.
right.
Okay. So
Community
there are
Santiago,
two different
right,
routes. Okay.
exactly. So many paths converge on the way of St. James. The Camino Ignaciano, the Ignatian way, is a much younger route because the Camino de Santiago is, oh, I don't know, pushing 2,000 years old. And well, it's a slight exaggeration, but the Ignatius did live 500 years ago. So the Ignatian Camino is the route that he traveled when he left his home in Loyola, which is in the Basque country, in the mountains in the Basque country, after his terrible cannonball injury and recovery and beginnings of a religious conversion, and was determined, actually, he was determined to get to the Holy Land. But his first step was to get to the Shrine of Our Lady of Montserrat, which was a very popular, even then, pilgrimage destination just north of Barcelona. So that beginning stage of his route is the one that we walked, Loyola to Montserrat, and then Manresa, which is the town where he lived for 11 months after his arrival at Montserrat.
So he was a soldier,
Mhm.
yes, first.
He
And
was.
and during that whole period, I'm assuming had some sort of desire born within him to find a better way, and then that started his conversion. Is that what where I'm at here?
So the we do the super quick Ignatius thing.
Okay.
He was a courtier, he was a swashbuckler, he was
Oh.
a womanizer. Um,
So
he
like a 2024 kind of guy.
yeah. He became a soldier, and at the Battle of Pamplona, um, the the sensible, logical thing to do would have been to surrender because his forces were terribly outmatched by the French. But surrender, like never surrender, you
Right.
know, he persuaded the commander and his fellow soldiers to fight on, leading to his own like devastating leg injury. His knee was shattered by a French cannonball, and his other leg injured by shrapnel. Many people died who would not otherwise have died.
Hmm.
Um, the French apparently were so impressed by his gallantry that they carried him home on a litter over, many mountainous miles, So can you imagine, like, here you are in the
Wow.
castle of Loyola, and like, here comes, this all these French soldiers with your kid on a litter. Like, what the heck? There's actually a statue in the courtyard of the family home of the French soldiers and Ignatius on the litter, and the family dog running up to lick his hand.
Oh my gosh.
Um, anyway, very long recuperation, including when his leg mended, it mended unattractively. There was a bump on his knee, and remember, this is the era of men in tights. So he had the doctors shave down the protruding bone in the era before anesthesia for vanity's sake. Okay, so this is the kind of guy we're
An
talking about.
interesting guy.
Yeah. So the story goes like, how boring is convalescence 500 years ago? No Netflix, what he really wanted to read was like books of chivalry and romances and courtly romances and all that. And there wasn't much of that to be had in the Tower House of Loyola. And his sister-in-law, Dona Magdalena, who had been caring for him since his mother died when he was a very young boy, um, she wasn't going to get him that stuff.
She
She
had
was,
her own agenda.
yeah, she absolutely had her own agenda. She's like, here, honey, here's a lives of the saints and a life of Christ. Have at it.
Oh my gosh.
But he began, he found that those things made an impression on him, and that he began to notice that he felt better after fantasizing about doing great things for God than he did after fantasizing about doing great worldly things. And so when I say initial conversion, because he really hadn't changed all that much, like he still wanted to fight for a lord and defend a lady.
Hmm.
He had a new lord and a new lady to focus on.
Well, it's, I feel like the only sort of instantaneous conversion, if it could be called that, that we've really ever kind of heard of, and maybe I'm sure there were others, but is like St. Paul getting struck off of the horse, like
Right,
that's by lightning, a bolt of lightning comes down. But I can't imagine that
right.
most of us have, or anyone really can say that they experience that, boom, that's it. I was that way, now I'm this way. You
Very
can't,
gradual. And notice St. Paul's personality didn't change much.
yeah.
Okay. And neither did Ignatius's. Like, so I
Yeah,
know
you are who you are. I
yeah,
mean,
you are. So, for example, on his way to Montserrat, in his autobiography, it says he fell into conversation with a Moor, a Muslim gentleman. Ignatius on a mule, the gentleman on a horse. They fall into conversation, which turns to the Blessed Mother's perpetual virginity, as it does when you meet a stranger on the road. And the Muslim gentleman says, like, he can totally buy the virgin birth. Like, he's done with that. Perpetual virginity, he's not there.
he's not quite, yeah, he doesn't quite get that.
He doesn't get that. So, and they talk for a while, and eventually the man spurs his horse and, rides off in on the broad road, was the direction of his travel. Ignatius is worrying that he has failed to adequately defend his lady's honor. and thinks that maybe the best thing for him to do is to catch up with that gentleman and, quote, give him a taste of his dagger. Like, this is how early in his conversion he was. Should he kill or not kill the stranger?
He had
Completely
a little
unable.
further of a way to go.
Yeah, completely unable to
He
make up
needed
his
that
mind.
long walk.
He lets the mule decide. And he said, like, he drops the reins, and if the mule follows the broad road, he'll catch up with the stranger and attack him. Or if the mule follows the path intended, then he will let it go. And thank God for the wisdom of the mule, you know?
Which is
So,
one of the things that I really want to get to
okay.
your book,
Yeah.
The Wisdom of the Mule.
Yeah. So anyway, so Ignatius winds up, he does his thing at the shrine of Montserrat. He hands over his sword and his dagger, and he keeps an all-night vigil, and he puts on his rough pilgrim's garb, and he takes off, limping on foot for the city of Manresa, where he winds up staying 11 months in prayer, in discernment, in mental health breakdown. His scrupulosity led him to the brink of suicide. His guilt over his earlier life, probably over all those dead soldiers whose deaths were on his shoulders, were on his conscience,
Yeah,
and
that's a reckoning.
yeah,
That's a reckoning.
but he got it together. And like the seeds of the spiritual exercises of Saint Ignatius were all drafted in that 11-month period. Um, so, and
So,
that's the route we followed.
so, so the lessons that I'm hearing just from this story is that everyone at any time can experience that sort of evolution of the spirit.
Right.
And it's not, in all likelihood, it's not going to happen with a lightning bolt.
We're never done.
No,
Never.
exactly. We're
Never.
never done. Never.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
think that that's one of the things that strikes me about this is that just the whole idea of a journey. I mean, clearly your journey had a finite beginning and an end, but the message is that our journey does not has a finite beginning, obviously, but our ending is never while we're here, doesn't ever have to be finite and finished.
Right. Right. Like to jump ahead to like what does it mean to live as a pilgrim? Like
Right.
part of what has becoming clear to me about pilgrimage is that we have a destination. We
Mhm.
were headed like Ignatius to Montserrat and Manresa.
Right.
But it's like being fixed, having your destination fixed, but also being very present to exactly where you are along the way, not being so fixed on your destination. Like I was talking to a woman who was going to do this hike on her own in her 70s. And she's
Mm.
like, "Any advice?" And I was like, don't do that. Take a friend.
Or
But as
just walk very fast.
yeah, but as we were talking about it, she said, and I was talking about the attitudes that we need to have. And I said, if it turns out you can't walk on a given day, like take a bus, take a train, call a cab, stay an extra night where you are. And she said, she's a marathoner. And she said, I have to get out of my marathoner perspective. Because in a marathon, you also know where you're going, but your only goal is to get there as quickly as possible.
Right.
That's not the goal in pilgrimage. The goal in pilgrimage is to be where you are on the way to where you know you want to be going.
Wow, that is profound. Be
Yeah.
where you are on the way to where you want to be going.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
I'm writing that down. I'll have to get the transcript to all of this to get all these nuggets
Yeah.
down well.
So just
So,
a tiny example, and then I'll let you ask your next question. So Sunday night, just Sunday night, I was falling asleep, and how you always sort of like review the day to come. And I said to my husband right before we drifted off, I was like, well, tomorrow's going to be a pilgrim kind of day because I was helping with Gwynedd Mercy Holiday Outreach in the morning and driving stuff to the Jesu school and then going to help a cousin with her newborn baby. Um, and then going to cantor for the novena at the Shrine of the Miraculous Medal in Germantown. I
wow.
was going to be gone for 12 hours and nothing was going to get done. You
Right.
know, no progress on anything from my to-do list. But I was like, so it's going to be a pilgrim day. Like, I know what I'm doing. Like, I'm just going to be in those places. Like, I still know where I'm heading professionally, personally, but but tomorrow I know exactly where I need to be at each point of the day, and that's going to be okay.
And that is the hardest thing to learn. And one of the things, this leads right into a brilliantly resilient theme, and that is don't be married to outcomes.
Right?
You can't, you,
No.
you have to do what you do what you have to do, but you have to be willing to let it evolve. And that means in an immediate circumstance, but it also means in the greater picture.
Right.
And you had that experience multiple times during your trek
Yes.
because the advice that you gave that woman, if you can't do it, stop and respect that. And
Yeah,
you had to stop.
I did. Yeah. I mean,
And you didn't like it.
I did not. I didn't like it the first time. I was very okay with it the second time. So I developed my first blister on day 0.
Oh, good heavens.
We were just walking around Loyola, and I'm in good sneakers and good socks, and by dinner time, I've got to get out of my good sneakers and good socks and into my sandals because I can already feel a blister starting. Day 0. We hadn't even
Oh
hiked anywhere yet. I hadn't put my
gosh.
boots on yet. So by the end of the first hike, I had this blister on the outside of my heel that had blown up to the size of a grape. Day 1.
Oh my gosh.
By midpoint, the outside of each heel has a grape-like blister on it, which I named. I said I in the end 7 named blisters. So the ones on my heels, the ones nipping at my heels, I called Fido, Rex, Max, and Fifi. Eventually, I got one under the ball of each foot, which I named Doom and Gloom. And my left baby toe blew up unrecognizably. So I called that Napoleon, as befits a little dictator, little tyrant. Um, so yeah, my feet were a mess and like pressed on, people helped me figure out what to do about it, and Porter, my husband, his like the bottom of one of his feet, like the ball of his whole foot was one big hot spot. And then the next day, one big bloody blister. And fortunately, like our blisters peaked at the same time. And Father Jose Iriberri, the director of the Ignatian Camino, our fearless leader for the whole thing, I mean, he looked at our feet that night and he was like, all right, I'm going to work on your feet for a while, but you're going to take the train tomorrow, And man, like I didn't, that is not the Camino I envisioned. I mean, crazy as it seems that yes, I want to do this long walk, but I'm a walker. I love to walk. And like the idea of just seeing all those places that Ignatius saw, walking across it in real time, like, I so wanted to do that. And, I didn't want to bag out, you know?
Yeah.
Um, and in the end, like I was 3 nights in one place. Fortunately, I only had to miss 2 days walks because one of the days I was grounded was a free day. Um, but I had this great email exchange with my spiritual director. Because, I was like, I'm gonna fail the Camino. I didn't know well enough. I didn't prepare well enough, and I failed to prepare, and now I'm gonna fail the Camino. And she was like, oh. And she wrote me back immediately and said, like, there's no such thing as failing the Camino if you regard it as a spiritual quest. It's not about the miles walked, you know. It's not about getting an A or a 4.0 or being able to say I walked every step of the way. Proud as I am. I mean, the oldest member who did the full Camino was 79 years old.
Oh my gosh.
He
That's
walked
crazy.
every blessed step.
That's crazy.
Hats off, hats
Yeah.
off. Um, yeah, Dave Hinshin, director of IVC New England. Hats off to him, but like that doesn't mean that I didn't have a good and valid
Experience. Yeah.
pilgrimage, because pilgrimage isn't about success. Ignatius says we should not be attached, we shouldn't fix our desires on success or failure. So
You
having
say so many things about all
yeah,
of those things in your book. And one of the things that literally jumped off the page to me was when you were talking, I believe this was when you were conferring with your spiritual advisor. It was about letting go of what you think should be.
yeah.
And I will add to that to allow for what could be.
Hmm. Hmm.
Because when we have a fixation about what we should do, what should happen, what should be a couple of things here. You say that the shoulds also tie us to the future
Mhm.
and the wants,
Right.
which is completely
Right.
opposite of what we have, which is
Yes,
this
wanting
moment.
tethers us to the future. Yes.
Yes, you said that.
Yeah.
And then I thought, this is an opportunity that when we let go of the should be's, the could be's start to surface.
Right, right. When I'm talking about what Ignatius says about not fixing our desires, and he gives these pairs of things, health or sickness, success or failure, riches or poverty, a long life or a short one. Granted, in each of those pairs, there's one that sounds like the
There's
better
one that looks better.
one. Yeah, it does. But I love that he uses the word fix, because when I hear the word fix, I think of like a butterfly pinned to a board in like a museum display. Butterflies should be floating freely. Instead of fixing our desires, like even those should float freely, because our
Mm.
free-floating desires can reveal God's deep desires for us. But when we decide, no, 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 I'm going to fix my desire here, even if I'm fixing my desire on what I think what God wants me to do, all of a sudden we've eliminated all those other lovely free-floating possibilities and the grace of the now. Because that was Susan's real point. Let go of all the hopes and imaginings that preceded what's happening and open yourself to the grace that's being offered through the reality of what is happening, not despite. Prepositions matter. Like,
Mm.
through there is grace in the blisters, you
Yeah.
know, even if I would so rather not have had them. The woman, I call her Mama Jane, Jane Asher from Australia, who helped me, who taught me how to mend my own blisters and was so helpful to me. I mean, she's this petite woman, 10 years my senior, who carried my pack in the mountains when I was really struggling, and told me stories and just was so incredibly helpful. Like, if I had been fit and strong and good at hills and completely blister free, like, would we have become so close so quickly? Would we still be good friends? Like,
Hmm.
would it still warm our hearts every time we exchange an email? I don't know. I just might have been another fit, independent, non-needy.
Ah, and that brings up another point that you talk about. You talk about it was something about vulnerability and being vulnerable. And
Mhm.
I can't now where oh
Distress of the vulnerable.
the distress of the vulnerable. And when
Mhm.
I wrote that down, my I couldn't even stop myself when I wrote that down. Right underneath it, I wrote, I hate being vulnerable. I hate
Right,
it. It just it just bothers me to no end. And
right.
and the thing is, and I preach this with being brilliantly resilient. There is a beauty in that. There is a beauty in our challenges. There is a beauty in our troubles because of multiple reasons. But first of all, for me, like when my son was going through his drug addiction struggles and all that, I had to put up my hand. I'm not a putter up a hander. I'm not, I'm like, and I can do it. Everybody just leave me alone. I can do it.
Right.
But I had to put up my hand, and that was a valuable lesson for me, and one that has carried on to many other things.
Right.
So there is a beauty in vulnerability that can allow us to grow if we will recognize that it's not a failure.
Because you know what you don't hate, Mary Fran? Helping vulnerable people.
Exactly.
You're so good at
I just
that.
don't like being one of them.
Why shouldn't other people have that joy?
Exactly. Exactly. And I think that is part of this was the other thing that struck me about your journey. It became part of as you went through it, building a community, and a community of strangers, at least at first,
Mhm.
who, when we kind of put aside our preconceived notions and live in that now and let go of the shoulds and let go of, the what ifs and the maybes and all that kind of stuff and just go, okay, what's right here in front of me? What's today? As you said, with still a vision, you still want to kind of have direction,
Sure.
but there's so many lessons that we can learn along the way if we let go of what we think should happen.
Right. Right. Exactly. And as you talk about vulnerability, like here we are, like a heartbeat away from Advent and Christmas. Like, how did God come to us?
Hmm.
Came to us as a newborn.
You don't get more vulnerable.
Right. There's one of my favorite lesser known Christmas songs is called Friends in Christ Rejoice. And there's a line in the refrain that says, like no God we had imagined is the baby in the straw.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. No, God
Yeah.
didn't come in on, flaming horses and a chariot and all that. God came as a child in
Yeah.
a manger.
Right.
And you don't get more vulnerable than that.
And yeah. And
So,
said,
okay. So I had said this to you before when we were chatting. When you kind of have, this is another problem, I think, for a lot of people, especially people who are faith-filled, because
mm-hmm.
when you make a commitment to something,
Mm-hmm.
you feel like you need to honor that commitment.
Mm-hmm.
When is it okay to recognize that you have to stop?
Right.
Like
That's,
when can you, and I do also talk about this in Brilliantly Resilient. I say we have to take imperfect action, but there are three courses of action. It's doing something, it's doing nothing at the moment and letting things evolve or unknot themselves. And sometimes it's retreat or surrender.
yeah.
So at what point, when you feel like you've committed to something, how do you stop? When do you say, okay, I got to stop?
Yeah. Well, okay. So sometimes the body puts its foot down.
Mm-hmm.
And I can tell you that in my freelance existence of going and doing, keynotes and talks and
Eight
what,
million things.
the only thing I have ever backed out of, like day of backed out of, whatever was wrong, I couldn't stop throwing up.
Mm.
And like, you just can't go do like a keynote for walking with purpose. Like,
When you're throwing up.
right.
Hold your bucket next to you and say, wait a minute,
Right. Yeah.
and then come
So,
back.
yeah. So, one, if you can't stop throwing up, you need to say no.
That's a good barometer. Okay, that's number
Yeah.
one.
Yeah. Right. That's a very low bar. But so like, I mean, it would be rare for me to cancel something for which, you know, people have people are expecting me.
Right.
There's an event organizer who has gathered a group who has paid good money, and
Right, right. And
like
that makes
yeah,
that makes sense. But I guess what I'm referencing is
more like
when you're
personal.
trying to solve a problem
Yeah,
that you're
yeah.
just not solving. Like at some point, and to your point though, this is a very valid thing to bring up. We're talking about spirituality, but we
Yeah.
also live in these corporal bodies. And I think there has to be sometimes a mutual respect because sometimes our body is telling us something that our spirit doesn't want to hear. Is that
hmm
possible too?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, our bodies are usually communicating, you
Right,
know, and we're often not terribly good at listening. Um, I feel like part of it, and this is a circular way of getting at your question, part of it involves getting better at knowing what to say yes or no to
right.
in the first place. Like, just as an example, I I'm flying to Detroit to do a thing for the mission division at the University of Detroit Mercy on a Tuesday. So I'm flying on a Wednesday. I'm flying out Tuesday because I will never fly the same day I'm scheduled to do
Oh, no,
something.
no, no, that's a bad
That's
idea. Hmm.
that way lies folly. So I'm flying Tuesday. I'm doing my thing Wednesday. There weren't a lot of great flights home that didn't get me in late Wednesday, so I was going to fly Thursday morning. And then a Walking with Purpose chapter at a parish asked me to come do a dramatic interpretation for their Walking with Purpose Advent by Candlelight
Oh,
on Thursday evening. And what I said to them was like, I know I can't plan to fly on Thursday and promise to be at your church Thursday night. Let me see if I can change my flight. So instead of a direct flight home on Thursday, I'm doing an indirect flight that gets me home like sometime after midnight, but at least I'll be home. I can sleep,
right, right,
like
right.
So I was not going to say yes to, yes, let me go straight from the airport to your church,
Right.
for example, And I'm trying to get better at not stacking things back to back
Hmm.
because I know how I feel when I get home at the end of something that expended a lot of spiritual and emotional and physical energy. There's that line in scripture with the healing of the woman with the hemorrhage. Jesus, aware that power had gone out from him.
Yeah. Like,
Yeah,
okay, I'm tired now.
yeah. I'm on the couch, like
Yeah.
I'm watching Madam Secretary.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not
Great show, by the
changing
way.
outfits, and I'm not changing outfits and going back on the road. So getting better at like not over promising. But then finding a way to be able to say, like, gosh, I'm sorry, like, here's what I can offer you now.
Hmm.
Um, you know, here's what I might be able to do later.
Right.
Um, I
But
mean,
but it comes down to respecting. So sometimes I think when people do good work,
mhm.
they feel that they have to constantly do good work.
Right, right.
And there does come a point at which you have to say, I can't, as you said, here's what I can offer,
Yeah,
but I can't commit to that right now.
right.
And I think that's okay. Like free yourself from that need to commit to things. And in a different way, again, if you have a problem that seems unsolvable, sometimes stepping away is the best thing that you can do.
Hmm.
To just allow for maybe additional wisdom, somebody else to step in. We have to also see ourselves, maybe this is part of your message too, not only as pilgrims on an individual journey, but as pilgrims who are part of a wider community.
Right, right. And I had an insight, a post-book finalization insight. Um, so like Father Berry would sometimes, I mean, he would always honor it if somebody said, I can't walk today. Every once in a while, he was like, you are not walking today. Or I am putting you in a cab at lunchtime. And people did not want to hear that sometimes.
Yeah,
Sometimes people really wanted to press on, except if someone pressed on unwisely, it was going to slow the whole group down,
right.
because we weren't going to leave her in the dust, it was going to slow the whole group down. I mean, if somebody got into trouble someplace where like there wasn't an easy access to a rescue vehicle, it was like really going to cause
Be a
problems for
problem.
the
Right,
group.
right, right,
So, like sometimes we have to step back, not just for the good of our body, but for the good of the body,
right.
you know?
I like that. The
Yeah,
body,
it just came to that a couple of days
the
ago.
body collective.
Right,
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
Like, let me step out and regroup and come back stronger and more helpful, as opposed to just like burdening the body with my whatever, whatever.
Right. With my will. It
Yeah, with
comes,
my will.
sometimes it comes down to okay,
Yeah,
what I want. We can't
yeah,
always consider, I mean, obviously, if that's our driving factor, as long as it's grounded,
yeah.
and we want something good, because we can want
Yes.
the wrong things. But there always should be a consideration of how is this going to affect not only my body, but the collective body? How is this decision that I'm making going to affect others?
Right.
Well, I could talk to you about this book and about your journey and about your spirituality for days on end. But what I want to know is, when is this book coming out? Where can people get it? And where can they just learn more about you? Because you are a wealth of, I just love the way you, as you say, you try to connect its spirituality, scripture, and everyday life. And it's just a beautiful thing that can help all of us on this path and journey that we're on. So give me some how to
Okay.
get to Christine
All
stuff.
right. So okay, first the book. So the book is published by Paraclete Press, which is, by the way, a ministry of the Community of Jesus that is an interfaith Benedictine monastic community on Cape Cod.
Wow.
It
Okay.
has sisters and brothers and lay people living in families. Look it up. Community of Jesus, Paraclete Press. They are amazing.
Wow.
Um, the official publication date is January 14th, which means that is the soonest, Amazon will ship it. It's the soonest anybody will ship it, except Paraclete Press, who will ship it as soon as it hits the warehouse, which should be about a month before publication. So if they
Oh,
get it in mid-December, like they will immediately send out any orders. So I will tell you, I have friends who want to give it as Christmas presents who have ordered straight through Paraclete.
perfect.
And, fingers crossed, but that is what we hope will happen. I also have my author copies coming as soon as they're ready. So if somebody really wants one before Christmas, they can also just get in touch with me and I'll like move heaven and earth to get a signed copy wherever. Okay, so that's the book. So my website, which I'm sure you're going to post in show notes or whatever, Christine-Marie-Eberle.com, is where to find me. Uh, the book is available all the places books are sold online. I should also have said that. But my website is where to find me. I have been blogging for years, so there is, a ton of my writing out there, links to my other two books, and links to the various kinds of events I can come do. I do everything from, brief keynote things to, you know, mornings of prayer, evenings of prayer, days of prayer, weekend retreats, half weekend retreats. I will go anywhere someone will pay to bring me and feed and house me and give me a my books.
That feed
Uh,
part was always important for me.
yeah, like I don't mind hopping on a plane, I don't mind hopping on a train. I'm going to Branson, Missouri in March. That's the other thing I should say. I am developing a whole series of retreats around a pilgrim's heart in Lent.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah, Lent starts March 5th. So if anybody who's listening to the sound of our voices would like something Lent themed, please be in touch with me because I'm not gonna fill the calendar to its margins, but there still certainly is some space. And I also do things on Zoom. I'm happy to Zoom somebody's way. So
Perfect. Well, as you know, I value your friendship. I value your perspective. And I just love the way that you, again, connect all of these things into I'm going to use air quotes here, a normal life, because, that varies for everybody what a normal life is. But I do think that we all have this desire there's something missing if we just focus on the secular and all of that. So for anybody who is looking to find a place for spirituality that really works in everyday life, I urge you to check out my friend Christine. Her books are beautiful. Her journey on this Ignatian Camino is a beautiful one to read. Please look Christine up. And if you need more brilliance and resilience in your life, head on over to brilliantlyresilient.net. You'll see one of those little magical pop-ups where you can sign up for our Brilliance Bit, which comes to you every time I do a podcast, which Christine will be a part of when this airs. And we will see you all next time on the next podcast of Brilliantly Resilient. Bye, everybody.
thanks, Mary Fran.
Thanks for tuning in to the Brilliantly Resilient podcast. Join our Facebook group and follow us on YouTube to be inspired with tools to reset, rise, and reveal your brilliance.